The church was full. Flowers on every pew. White ribbons tied to the ends of each row. Sunlight coming through the tall windows in long, clean lines. Everything arranged with care. Everything exactly right. Tasha Brooks sat at the very back, in a simple black dress, and watched her husband marry her sister. She had chosen the back row deliberately. Far enough that nobody would turn and see her. Close enough that she could not pretend this was not happening. The pastor's voice moved through the church loudly. "Do you, Daniel Cole, take this woman?" Tasha's hands were folded in her lap. Her back was straight. Her face was forward. The tears came anyway. She did not wipe them. She did not move. She just sat there and let them fall because there was nothing left in her to fight them with. She had told herself she was coming to get closure. "You may kiss the bride." The church erupted. Clapping, cheering, someone crying happy tears near the front. A flower girl dropping her basket and chasing petals across the floor. Tasha went completely still. Then a small body landed on the bench beside her. She turned, startled. A boy, maybe 6 years old, in a tiny white dress shirt that had already come untucked, was looking at her with very serious eyes. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded handkerchief. He held it out with both hands towards her. She stared at him. "You are crying too much," he said, very matter-of-fact. "You will get headache." She laughed. It came out of nowhere, then she pressed her hand to her mouth. "My name is Min Jun," he said. "Tasha," she whispered. He nodded, accepting this. Then he was quiet for a moment, his small feet swinging above the floor, not quite reaching it. "When my mommy died," he said, "I cried like you. A lot. At her funeral, I cried so much my dad had to take me outside." She turned to look at him. Then she pulled him into her arms without thinking. He let her. He leaned in, this small stranger in an untucked shirt, and patted her back twice. And Tasha cried. Properly this time. She let herself feel it all. She cried for the house. For the signature she hadn't understood. For every 4 a.m. she spent working so Daniel could sleep in. For every time Kiera said, "I love you," and she believed it. She cried until there was nothing left. When she finally pulled back, Min Jun looked at her face, assessed it carefully, and nodded once. Satisfied. She would have laughed again if she had anything left. At the front of the church, she did not notice the man who had been watching them quietly since the moment the boy climbed off his seat and walked to the back row alone. He did not look away. To understand why Tasha Brooks was sitting at the back of her own husband's wedding, we have to go back to where it started. And stay with us, because there is a moment still coming, a moment where the man she will fall in love with looks her in the eye and speaks 8 words that will hurt her worse than anything in that church ever did. Hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling us what time you came across this video. We love to hear from you. Episode 2. The bakery opened at 6. Tasha was always there by 4. That was 2 hours before the first customer, 2 hours before the city fully woke up, 2 hours that belonged to nobody but her and the low hum of the radio she kept on the shelf above the sink. She liked those hours. The quiet had a different texture before sunrise, thicker, steadier, easier to move through. She would start the dough first, flour to the counter, hands in, the motions automatic after 10 years of doing them the same way. Then the ovens, preheating while she worked. Then the display case, which she would wipe down and line before covering with the cloth her mother had sewn from old curtain material, pale yellow, faded almost to white now, hemmed unevenly because her mother had taught herself to sew in her 40s and never got the tension quite right. Tasha smoothed that cloth every morning before she opened the case. Both hands, working from the center outward, pressing out creases that weren't really there. It was not a rational thing to do. She knew that. She did it anyway. Her father had died when she was 16. A Tuesday in November. Heart attack, no warning, no chance to prepare. He was there in the morning when she left for school and gone by the time she came home. She had stood in the kitchen that evening watching her mother sit very still at the table and understood, not in words but in her body, that she was now one of the people responsible for holding this family up. She was 16. She didn't ask for the job. It was just there, and she was the one standing closest to it. Her mother got sick 2 years later. It started slowly and quietly until one day the symptoms are impossible to ignore. By then, Kiera was 12. Kiera, who was loud in every room she entered, who laughed at her own jokes before she finished telling them, who once cried for 40 minutes because a stray cat outside their building walked away when she tried to pet it, who needed help with homework and needed someone to braid her hair and needed, constantly, the steady reassurance that their mother no longer had the energy to give. Tasha gave it. She dropped out of college in her first semester. She found the bakery job. She came home every evening and sat at the kitchen table with Kiera and went through whatever subject was causing problems that week. She took her mother to appointments on weekends. She learned to budget for 3 people on 1 income, which mostly meant she stopped buying things for herself and stopped thinking of that as a sacrifice. She was just doing what needed doing. There was nobody else. Years passed. Her mother's health stabilized into something manageable. Kiera grew into a sharp, ambitious young woman who went to college on a partial scholarship and came home for holidays with big plans and bigger energy. She would sit in the bakery on slow afternoons and say, "When I make real money, you are done working like this. I am going to take care of you." Tasha always smiled. She never expected repayment. She didn't do it for repayment. She did it because Kiera was hers to take care of, and taking care of people was what Tasha did. It was, if she was honest with herself, which she rarely was, the only identity she was completely sure of. Daniel Cole started coming in on a Wednesday. He ordered coffee, black, and a croissant, and he sat at the small table by the window instead of taking his order to go. He came back Thursday, and Friday, and the following Monday. By the second week, he was staying past his coffee to talk. He was easy to talk to. That was the thing. He asked questions, and then actually listened to the answers. He laughed at the right moments. He noticed things, that she always straightened the same picture frame above the register, that she knew every regular customer's order before they reached the counter, that she moved through the bakery like someone who had learned its geometry by heart. "I don't know how you do it," he said one evening, walking her home after her shift. "You work this hard, you take care of your whole family, and you still show up every morning with a smile on your face." Nobody had ever said that to her. She had been doing those things so long they had stopped feeling like choices. They were just the shape of her life, and she moved through them because they were there. For someone to look at that shape and call it something worth admiring, she did not know what to do with it. She married him 3 years later. Kiera was her maid of honor. She cried so loudly during the vows that people near her were turning around, half concerned, half laughing. Afterward, she held Tasha's face in both hands and said, "My sister finally has someone to take care of her now." Tasha believed that. She believed it because she wanted to. Because after years of being the one who stayed and held and gave, the idea that it might finally be her turn, that someone was choosing to stand beside her the way she had stood beside everyone else, was the most relieving thing she had ever been offered. She didn't look closely at what she was believing. She just held it. The first year of marriage was good. Genuinely good. They cooked together on Sundays. They had long plans about expanding the bakery. Daniel made her laugh and helped around the house. Then slowly things shifted. Daniel lost his job and didn't tell her. He became harder to reach inside his own silence. She told herself it was stress. She told herself it would pass. She worked longer hours and said less about it, because she had spent her whole life handling hard things quietly, and she did not know another way. She did not notice that Kiera had started visiting the house more on the days Tasha worked late. She was not looking for anything wrong. She never thought she'd need to. She covered the display case every morning with her mother's cloth and smoothed it with both hands. She did what needed doing. She held things together because that was what she knew how to do. That was the lie she had been living inside for so long it had started to feel like truth. She was the one who holds things. She was not the one who gets held. Episode 3. The bakery closed for repairs on a Thursday. A pipe had burst in the back wall, water spreading under the baseboards overnight. The repair crew said it would take the rest of the day. Tasha sent her one employee home, locked up, and walked back to the house 3 hours earlier than usual. She noticed Daniel's car in the driveway. She thought nothing of it. He had been working from home lately, or said he was. She went in through the front door, set her bag on the kitchen counter, and walked down the hallway toward the bedroom because she wanted to change her shoes. She opened the door. What she saw took a moment to reach her. Like the image arrived before her brain was ready to accept what it was showing her. Kiera was the one who moved first. She grabbed the sheet and covered her naked body. She said something, words that came out broken and airless. Then she steadied, and she said it clearly. I didn't plan it. It just happened. Tasha stood in the doorway. She looked at Daniel. He said nothing. He did not move. He sat there and looked at the wall beside her head, and that was the thing, not what Kiera said, not the scene itself, but the wall. He could not even look at her. After 3 years of marriage, after every 4 a.m. she had worked, every bill she had paid alone while he was between jobs, every time she had told herself it was just a rough season, he sat there and looked at the wall. She turned around and walked back down the hallway. She sat at the kitchen table. She did not cry. She did not throw anything. She sat very still with her hands flat on the table and stared at the grain of the wood, and somewhere behind her eyes, something that had been working very hard for a very long time simply stopped. The divorce took 4 months. Daniel moved quickly, which told her he had been thinking about it before she had any reason to. He had a lawyer within 2 weeks. The conversations were short and practical and conducted mostly through that lawyer because every time Tasha tried to speak to him directly, he found a reason to end the call. Kiera did not call at all. Tasha went to work. She came home to the house, which felt wrong in every room now, and she went to work again. She told her mother only that the marriage was over and deflected every question after that. Her mother had enough to carry. Then the documents came. A letter from a property firm, addressed to her, explaining the status of the mortgage on the house. She read it twice before she understood what it was saying. Then she called the number at the bottom. The woman on the phone was apologetic, professional, and clear. The ownership of the property had been transferred 8 months ago. There were signed documents. Her signature was on them. She remembered the papers Daniel had put in front of her one evening. A stack of forms he said were refinancing documents, something to do with the interest rate. He had explained it quickly, and she had been tired, and she had trusted him, and she had signed. That was the house. Gone. She lost her husband first, then her sister, then the house. Then, for a period of months that she could not fully account for later, she nearly lost herself. She stopped baking on her days off. She stopped answering calls she didn't have to answer. She moved through her days doing exactly what was required and nothing more, because anything more than what was required felt like more than she had. She found out about the wedding from a mutual acquaintance who mentioned it without thinking, the way people mention things they assume everyone already knows. She went home and sat with that information for 3 days. She told herself she was not going. Then she told herself she would go only to prove to herself she could. Then she stopped explaining it and just went. She put on a black dress. She did not do anything elaborate with her hair. She looked at herself in the mirror for a long time, not checking anything, just looking, the way you look at something before you leave it behind. She drove to the church alone. She walked in alone. She went to the very last row, the very last seat, the one closest to the door, and she sat down and folded her hands in her lap and looked straight ahead at her husband and her sister standing at the altar together. She told herself, watch, see it. Let your heart catch up to what your mind already knows. But this wasn't where the story ended. This was where it began. Episode 4. 2 weeks after the wedding, a corporate event order came in, 40 assorted pastry boxes, delivered by 9 in the morning. Tasha arrived with the van, carried the first stack through the lobby, and was halfway back to the entrance when she heard her name. Not her full name, just Tasha. She turned around. Minjun was running across the lobby in a school uniform, backpack bouncing, completely undeterred by the people around him. He stopped directly in front of her, looked up with the same serious eyes from the church, and said, I told my dad you would come back. He said I was being hopeful. I was right. She laughed before she could stop herself. She looked up and found the man from the church, standing about 20 feet away, watching. He walked over slowly. He recognized you before I did, he said. His English was careful, precise, chosen deliberately. I'm Daewin Khan. I apologize for whatever he said to you at that wedding. He has no restraint in public. I didn't mind, she said. Minjun had already found the pastry boxes and was trying to calculate which one was easiest to open. That was how it started. Jae Hyun brought Minjun to the bakery the following Saturday. Minjun went straight behind the counter like he owned it, and Tasha let him because he was already there, and the look on his face was so completely at home that redirecting him felt wrong. He sat on the counter and asked questions continuously. Why does dough feel like that? What happens if you put too much sugar? Can I eat this piece right here? Why does the oven make that sound? What is that cloth for? When she told him the cloth was her mother's, he touched it very gently with one finger and then pulled his hand back. He fell asleep in the chair in the back room by early afternoon. She put her apron over him and turned the radio down and kept working. Jae-hyun sat at the small table near the register and did not talk much. He answered emails. He drank his coffee. When the oven made a knocking sound it hadn't made before, he looked up. How long has it been doing that? 3 weeks. He set his phone down, went to the back, and spent 40 minutes with the panel open while she worked around him. When he came out, his sleeves were rolled up and there was grease on his forearm. Igniter was loose, he said. It will hold for now. I'll bring the right part next week. She thanked him. He just nodded and went back to his coffee. He did bring the right part the following week. He also, without mentioning it, fixed the hinge on the display case that had been stiff for months. In March, a deposit arrived in her business account. Significant, unexplained. She called her bank and traced it to a holding account she didn't recognize. Mrs. Park, her most loyal customer for 6 years, had mentioned just the week before that she wished she could do something to help Tasha expand. The deposit arrived shortly after that conversation. Tasha decided it was Mrs. Park being quietly generous. She did not investigate further. She was grateful, and she moved forward. One afternoon in April, Tasha was portioning dough at the counter when Minjun reached past her for a piece of it, missed, grabbed her arm to steady himself, and said without thinking, "Sorry, Tasha Mom." He froze. She felt him go, completely still beside her. "I didn't," he started. He stopped again. His face had gone very serious in the way it did when he was working out whether he had done something wrong. She put down what she was holding. She turned to him and pulled him into a hug. "That's okay," she said. He stayed tense for a moment. Then he relaxed slowly. She held on to him a beat longer than she needed to, then let go and went back to her dough. She did not let herself think too carefully about why she had meant it so completely. The power went out on a Wednesday evening in late April. Rain had been coming down hard for an hour. Minjun was asleep in the back room. Tasha and Jae-hyun sat in the dark at the small table near the register with the rain against the windows and a single candle she had found in the supply drawer. "I saw you," he said, "at that wedding." "I know," she said. He looked at her for a moment. "You look like someone had erased your life." She looked at the candle. They did. The rain hit the window. "Then we will draw a new one," he said quietly. He leaned across the small table and kissed her. Slow, deliberate, with both hands still on the table. She did not move away. She sat there and let herself be kissed by someone who was being careful with her, and it was so different from anything she was used to that for a moment she forgot to breathe. When he pulled back, neither of them said anything. The rain continued. In the back room, Minjun slept on, completely unaware that something had just shifted in the dark. Episode 5. It started with a news article. Tasha saw it on her phone while she was eating lunch at the bakery counter. A short piece, local business news, about a fraud investigation involving a logistics and property company called Meridian Group. She almost scrolled past it. Then she saw Daniel's name in the third paragraph. She put down her fork. She read the whole thing twice. Daniel Cole and Kiera Brooks were listed as persons of interest in an investigation into property fraud, money laundering, and falsified logistics contracts. The house Tasha had lost was mentioned, not by her name, but by address. One of several properties transferred through fraudulent documentation. Her hands were steady while she read. She noted that and filed it away. She did not call anyone. She went back to work. She did not know, when she told Jae-hyun that evening, that the name Meridian Group would do what it did to his face. She mentioned it plainly, sitting across from him at the small table, Minjun in the back room doing homework. She said she had seen the article. She said Daniel and Kiera were involved in the investigation. She said the house she had lost was connected to it. Jae-hyun went very still. "Meridian Group," he finally said. "Yes." He looked at the table. "My wife," he said. 3 years ago. There was a car accident. The investigation after. They traced the truck driver to a logistics company. The company had forged licenses, forged safety records. They buried the evidence because the company had connections. He paused. The company was Meridian. The bakery was very quiet. The investigation has been open since then, he said. Going nowhere. Every time it gets close to something, it stops. She said his name. He looked up, and she watched him put it together. She could see it happening, his eyes moving across her face, calculating, landing somewhere. Daniel Cole, he said. That is your ex-husband. Yes. You were married to him. For 3 years. I told you that. You told me you were divorced. You told me your sister. He stopped. He pushed back from the table and stood up. She stood too. Jae-hyun. How long have you known about Meridian? I saw the article today. An hour before I came here. He looked at her. His face was not angry. It was closed, every part of it pulled inward, and that was worse than anger because there was nothing in it she could reach. You came into my life, he said, connected to the people who destroyed my family. She opened her mouth. She had things to say, true things, important things, the whole shape of what had happened to her, and she looked at his face and understood that none of it would make sense right now. He had already decided what she was in relation to this. She could see it. She picked up her bag. She walked to the backroom doorway and stood there for a moment. Min-jun was at the small desk, pencil in hand, bent over his notebook. His backpack was on the floor beside him. There was an eraser mark on his cheek. She did not go in. She turned and walked out of the bakery. She got her car, sat in the driver's seat, and stared at the steering wheel for a long time. She had not said goodbye to Min-jun. That was the thing that stayed with her on the drive home, and through the night, and into the next morning. Not Jae-hyun's words, not the closed expression on his face, not even the fresh understanding that Meridian had taken something from him that could never be returned. Just the image of Min-jun at that desk, bent over his notebook, not knowing she had been standing at the door. Not knowing she had left without saying his name. She had promised him once, without using those exact words, that she was not the kind of person who disappeared. She had just disappeared. That was the part she could not forgive herself for. What she did not know, what she had no way of knowing yet, was that Jae-hyun had known her name before she ever introduced herself. That the deposit in her account in March had come from him. That he had chosen her, quietly and deliberately, before any of this. And then fear had arrived, and he had undone all of it in 8 words. Episode 6. She did not sleep that night. By 3:30 she gave up trying and drove to the bakery. She let herself in, turned on the lights over the counter, and stood in the middle of the floor for a moment without moving. Then she went to the display case and smoothed her mother's cloth. Both hands, center outward. The same motion she had done every morning for 10 years. The cloth was thinner now than it used to be, the yellow almost completely washed out. The uneven hem her mother had sewn was still there, each stitch a little uneven from the next. She pressed it flat and left her hands there. The oven stayed off. She had come in with the intention of working. She had told herself that work was the thing that would make this manageable, the way it had always made everything manageable. The repetition, the physical effort, the satisfaction of the dough responding correctly under her hands. But she stood at the counter, and the intention went nowhere. She could not make herself begin. She noticed the apron hanging on the hook near the backroom door. She had put it there the last time Min-jun fell asleep in the chair. She had meant to move it. It wasn't her usual hook, and it blocked the light switch slightly, but she hadn't moved it. She kept almost moving it, and then not. She looked at it now, and looked away. She got the bowl out for cake batter. She did not know why cake specifically. There was no order for cake, no occasion, no reason. She measured flour, sugar, butter. She cracked 2 eggs. She mixed it long enough to watch it come together, the batter pale and smooth in the bowl. Then she stopped. She stood at the counter with the bowl in front of her and did not continue. Because what was she making this for? Who was she making this for? She covered the bowl and put it in the refrigerator and stood with her hand on the door after she closed it. The voice in her head was not dramatic. It did not announce itself. It was just there, low and steady, the way it had always been, present in the background of her life for so long she had mostly stopped noticing it. It said, "This is what you are for. Not for keeping. For providing. For holding. For being the one who stays when everyone else leaves, or when they don't leave, when she is the one who ends up losing them anyway." Daniel had looked at the wall. Kiera had grabbed the sheet. Jae-hyun had closed his face and said 8 words. And each time, she had gathered what remained and kept going because that was the only thing she knew how to do. She had believed, briefly, that something was different with Jae-hyun, that he saw her in a way that was more than useful. But it had taken him less than a minute to rearrange everything he knew about her and put her in a category she did not belong in. He had not asked. He had not waited. He had simply looked at what she was adjacent to and decided what she was. And she had not even argued. She had just walked out because some part of her had recognized the expression on his face, that closed, decided look, and known that she had seen it before. That she had always been one piece of information away from becoming a problem in the people she trusted most. She called her mother at 7:30. Her mother was in assisted living now, a small facility across town. She had good days and slower days. This was a good day. She answered on the second ring, voice clear, wanting to know if Tasha had eaten breakfast. Tasha said yes. She had not. She sat on the stool behind the counter and listened to her mother talk. About the woman in the next room who played cards too loudly. About a television program she had watched the night before. About how the physical therapist had told her she was improving and she wasn't sure she believed him, but she supposed it was nice to hear. Tasha said, and that's good, and I'm glad, at the right intervals. She did not say, I am alone in my bakery at 7:30 in the morning, and there is unfinished cake batter in my refrigerator, and I cannot make myself turn the oven on. She did not say, I left a child sitting at a desk without saying goodbye. She did not say, I think I have been wrong about myself for a long time, and I do not know how to be different. She just listened to her mother's voice and held the phone with both hands, and when they said goodbye, she sat there a little longer in the quiet. The apron on the wrong hook, the cloth on the display case, the oven still cold. Episode 7. She was behind a counter on a Thursday afternoon when the door opened and Minjun walked in alone. No backpack. Still in his school uniform. His eyes were red and his face was set in the determined way children look when they have decided to do something and are not going to be talked out of it. He walked straight to the counter and looked at her. You promised, he said. His voice broke on the second word. You promised you would not disappear. You said that was okay. When I called you, you held me and you said it was okay. And then you left and you did not come back, and I waited and you did not come back. She came around the counter. She did not say anything. There was nothing to say that was more important than getting to him quickly. She crouched down in front of him and he grabbed her and held on with both arms, his face against her shoulder, and cried the way he had cried at the church, completely, without trying to manage it. She held him, her hand on his back, steady. I'm here, she said. I'm right here. She meant it more completely than she had meant almost anything in recent memory. She did not know what time it was when he stopped crying. She had moved them to the chair in the back room at some point, and he had climbed into her lap, and she had let him stay there, one hand on his back, the radio low in the other room. He fell asleep. She did not move. She sat in that chair with Minjun in her arms and looked at the apron still hanging on the wrong hook, and at the refrigerator where the unfinished cake batter was still sitting, and she thought about the voice that had been telling her for weeks, for years, if she was honest, what she was for. It had been wrong. She could see that now, clearly, without having to argue herself into it. She had survived her father dying. She had survived her mother's illness. She had survived Daniel and Kiera, and the house and all of it. She had come out the other side of every single one of those things, still standing, still working, still opening the bakery at 4 in the morning and smoothing the cloth on the display case. She had not disappeared. Not once. Not ever. And she was not going to start now because a man had been afraid. She was still there. That was the truth. That had always been the truth. Jae-hyun arrived at 8:30. He came in quietly and stood in the doorway of the back room. He looked at them, Minjun asleep in her arms, her hand resting on his back, and he stood there for a long moment without speaking. She looked at him over the top of Minjun's head. He sat down on the stool across from her. He put his elbows on his knees and looked at the floor. When my wife died, he said quietly. I spent a long time not feeling anything. And then Minjun needed me to feel something and I learned how again, slowly for him. He paused. When I started feeling something for you, it felt like standing on a bridge and not knowing what was underneath. She looked at him. So, you jumped off before anyone could push you. He didn't answer. That was his answer. You already lost me, she said, when you stopped trusting me. He looked up. I know, he said. Neither of them said anything after that. There was nothing more to say tonight. She knew it and he knew it, but he stayed. He sat on that stool while Minjun slept in her arms and the rain came back against the windows, and he did not leave. The letter from the prosecutor's office arrived the following Monday. They had the documents. The ones she had signed without understanding what they were. They needed her statement. The trial date was set. She read the letter once, folded it neatly, and put it in her bag. She was ready. Episode 8. The prosecutor's office was on the 4th floor of a building downtown. Small conference room. A table, for chairs, a recorder. A woman named Ms. Cho who asked questions in a calm and organized way. Tasha answered every one of them. She explained the evening Daniel had put the papers in front of her. She described where they were sitting. She described what he had told her, that it was a refinancing form, that it would lower their monthly rate, that she just needed to sign at the 3 marked places. She described how tired she had been, how she had not read them fully, how she had trusted him. She did not apologize for trusting him. It was not something she needed to apologize for. Ms. Cho asked if she had received anything in exchange for signing. Tasha said no. Ms. Cho asked if she had had any knowledge of Meridian Group before the news article. Tasha said no. She did not perform distress. She did not collapse. She simply told the truth in the order that it happened, and when she was finished, she sat quietly while Ms. Cho reviewed her notes. Daniel and Kiera were arrested 14 days later. She heard about it through the same mutual acquaintance who had told her about the wedding. The woman texted her at 7 in the morning, and Tasha read it standing at the display case with her hands still on her mother's cloth. She stood there for a moment. Then she smoothed the cloth, opened the display case, and started arranging the morning pastries. The house was returned to her 6 weeks later as part of the fraud settlement. She stood in the empty rooms and walked through each one slowly. The kitchen where she had sat with her hands flat on the table after the worst evening of her life. The hallway. The bedroom doorway. She stood in each place and let herself remember. Then she closed the door behind her. 3 days before the courthouse appearance, Jae-hyun came to the bakery after closing. He sat across from her at the small table and told her everything. He had known her name before Minjun described his crying friend at the church. His late wife's sister, Soo-yeon, had been quietly tracking the Meridian investigation for years. She had found Tasha's name in the property fraud files 18 months ago. She had tried to find a way to reach her. She had been the one to route the investment through Jae-hyun's company when she understood the bakery was Tasha's livelihood. Tasha was quiet for a long time. She was trying to reach me, she said, for years. Because we were both hurt by the same people. Yes. She looked at the table. All those months, she had assumed Mrs. Park. All that time the answer had been sitting right beside her, and she hadn't known where to look. The same people who had taken Jae-hyun's wife had taken her house, her marriage, her sister. Tasha had never been on the wrong side of this. She had been on his side from the beginning, without either of them knowing it. He knew that now. When she walked out of the courthouse on the day of the hearing, the sun was out. She came through the glass doors and stopped at the top of the steps. Jae-hyun was at the bottom, not in front of her, not directing her somewhere, just there at the bottom of the steps, waiting. She walked down. He fell into step beside her. They did not say anything for half a block. She did not need him to explain, and he did not try to. He was simply beside her, in the way that matters, not making it about himself. Not asking anything of her, just present. After a while she reached over and took his hand. He held it. They kept walking. Episode 9. Nobody announced that things were getting better. There was no conversation where they decided what they were to each other. No evening where everything was laid out and agreed upon. It happened the way most real things happen. Gradually, in small moments, without ceremony, Jae-hyun started coming in before the bakery opened. Not every day. 3 mornings a week, sometimes 4. He would arrive while it was still dark, let himself in with the keys she had not given him so much as stop taking back, and make coffee while she started the dough. He did not talk much in the early hours. Neither did she. They moved around each other in the quiet the way people do when they have stopped needing to perform being comfortable and have simply become comfortable. He fixed the shelf above the sink on a Tuesday without telling her it was on his list to do. She came in from the back and it was done, level and solid. The brackets he had replaced sitting in a neat pile on the counter beside his coffee cup. She looked at it for a moment. She did not say thank you in words. She moved his coffee cup 2 inches, so it wasn't near the edge, and he noticed, and that was enough. Minjun's homework had migrated entirely to the bakery counter. He had a system now. Backpack on the left stool, pencil case open, books stacked in the order he intended to do them, which was never the order he actually did them. He would start with whatever subject he liked most, work his way sideways into something else, and eventually require assistance with the thing he had been avoiding the whole time. He stole dough continuously. She had stopped pretending not to notice. She would slide a small piece toward him without looking up, and he would take it with the seriousness of someone receiving something officially offered, and then 5 minutes later his hand would appear at the edge of the bowl again. Minyoon, I am helping. I am checking the texture. You have checked it 4 times. It is very important to be thorough. Jae-hyun, from the table near the register. Minjun. A pause. I know what you were just. The boy withdrew his hand and returned to his mathematics with great dignity. Tasha kept her face turned toward the counter, so they wouldn't see her smiling. These were the hours she had not known to want. Not the dramatic moments, not the sweeping turns, just this. A child arguing about dough. A man drinking coffee near the register. The radio low. The morning coming in through the front window in long, clean lines. She had spent so many years filling other people's hours and not noticing that her own were empty. She noticed now. The afternoon Minjun made his announcement. He was sitting on the counter. A privilege that had been officially revoked twice and continued anyway, eating a piece of bread she had set out for him. He looked at his father. He looked at Tasha. He seemed to arrive at a conclusion. He reached over and took one of each of their hands, holding them with the full seriousness he brought to things he had decided were important. You wasted too much time, he said. Both of you. Deun said, carefully, Minyoon. I already told my teacher I have a mom. He looked at Tasha directly. I told her in September. She wrote it on the form. It is official. Tasha pressed her lips together. So, he continued, you should get married. Soon. I think this weekend is good. I am free this weekend. She laughed. It came out completely and without warning, the kind of laugh that takes over your whole face, and she put her free hand over her mouth and looked at Jae-hyun, whose expression had gone somewhere between moved and entirely undone. He looked at her over the top of Minjun's head. He's not wrong, he said quietly, about the wasted time. No, she said. He's not. Minjun looked between them and nodded, satisfied. He released their hands, picked up his bread, and returned to his homework as if the matter were settled. It was mostly. Some weeks later, on a Tuesday morning before opening, Tasha stood at the display case and smoothed her mother's cloth. She pressed it flat and left her hands there for a moment. Then she saw it, taped to the glass on the inside of the case. Carefully, with 4 small pieces of tape at each corner so it wouldn't fall, was a drawing. Crayon on white paper, 3 figures side by side, all holding hands. The tallest on the left, the medium one on the right, the small one in the middle. Beneath them, in a child's handwriting, with full confidence and no regard for straight lines. Dad, Mom, me. She stood there and looked at it. She heard Jae-hyun come in behind her, heard him set down the coffee, heard him stop when he saw what she was looking at. He put his hand on her back. Steady and warm, the way he did things, without announcement, without asking for acknowledgement. She covered his hand with hers. The day she sat crying at the back of a wedding was not the day her life ended. It was the day her real family quietly found her. If Tasha's story moved you, if you saw yourself or someone you love in any part of it, give this video a like and subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. And tell me this in the comments. Is there someone in your life who showed up for everyone else but never let anyone show up for them? Tell me about that person. They deserve to be seen.